A Nigerian proverb says, when the roof starts leaking in the dry season, the wise do not wait for the rain. That is where Nigeria is right now on data protection. For years, privacy law sounded like one of those fine-sounding policy ideas people mention at conferences and then ignore in real life. But this April, the story changed. The Nigeria Data Protection Commission, the NDPC, announced investigations into alleged data breaches involving Remita and Sterling Bank, and then opened another investigation into the reported breach at the Corporate Affairs Commission, the CAC. These are not random platforms. These are serious institutions sitting close to money, identity, registration, and trust. Start with Remita and Sterling Bank. On April 5, 2026, NDPC announced that it was investigating the two parties over an alleged data breach. Punch reported that the commission said a notice of investigation had been served on April 1 and that relevant parties had already started providing information to support the probe. That matters because it shows this was not just social media noise. The regulator formally moved in. Then came CAC. On April 15th, CAC said it was reviewing a cybersecurity incident involving unauthorized access to limited parts of its information systems. It also said containment measures had been activated and additional safeguards were put in place, while users were urged to update their login credentials. 2 days later, NDPC publicly announced that it had launched an investigation into the alleged breach at CAC. Now, this is where the story gets even bigger. Business Day reported that hackers stole and leaked more than 15 million sensitive CAC company documents and said the attack could undermine anti-money laundering reforms. That number is explosive. But to stay accurate, we need to be clear. CAC itself described the incident as unauthorized access to limited parts of its systems. So right now there is a gap between CAC's official language and the scale described in some media reports. That gap is exactly why investigations matter. What does this mean in plain English? It means Nigeria's data protection problem is no longer abstract. It is not about cookie banners. It is not about legal paperwork that companies dump on a website footer. It is about whether the systems Nigerians use to move money, register companies, and prove corporate existence are actually secure enough for the digital economy the country says it wants to build. And this is why the CAC story hits hard. CAC is central to Nigeria's formal business architecture. If confidence in that system is shaken, the damage goes beyond one agency. It affects founders, investors, compliance officers, banks, lawyers, procurement teams,
and anyone who depends on verified company records. If records are exposed, manipulated, or distrusted, the ripple effect is massive. That is also why Business Day framed the incident as a threat to anti-money laundering reforms. The Remita angle is just as serious, but for a different reason. Remita sits close to payments and digital financial processes. Once a platform like that comes under an alleged breach investigation, the issue becomes bigger than one company. It raises questions about vendor risk, third-party access, institutional oversight, breach response speed, and whether Nigeria's major processors are building security fast enough for the volume of data they hold. The NDPC probe does not prove wrongdoing by itself, but it shows the regulator believes the allegations are serious enough to examine formally. This is also the moment where the NDPA, Nigeria's Data Protection Act framework, starts to feel real to businesses. Because once NDPC starts investigating major entities in public, every serious company should understand the message. Data governance is no longer optional, and cybersecurity failure is no longer just an IT problem. It is a boardroom problem, a legal problem, and a reputational problem. Another signal that this is getting serious is NDPC's own advisory on April 17 warning about escalating threats to data security architecture. That suggests the regulator itself sees a wider pattern, not just isolated incidents. So this is not merely a story about Remita or CAC. It is a warning shot to Nigerian banks, fintechs, registries, telcos, hospitals, schools, and public agencies. The big question now is not whether Nigeria has a data protection conversation. It clearly does. The real question is whether enforcement, breach disclosure, and institutional transparency will move fast enough to build trust before the next major exposure lands. Because once users start believing their personal or corporate data is never safe, the digital economy starts bleeding from the inside. So here is the takeaway. The NDPC probe into Remita and Sterling Bank, the CAC breach, and the latest security first truly public data protection stress test. And what happens next will tell us whether privacy and cybersecurity in Nigeria are becoming real pillars of digital trust or just crisis language used after the damage is done. If you run a business, work in compliance, or just care about who holds your data, this is the time to pay attention. Because data protection in Nigeria is no longer tomorrow's issue. It is already here.